Welcome back to the Drummer Mindset Podcast with me, Joel Pereira. I have another one for you here. I'm super excited about this one. This is one where I actually feel like this is it's just exciting to catch an artist at this point in their career. They've been paying their dues and they're about to drop their own, they're working on their own album, and they've been collaborating with a ton of great folks for a long time. So this is Diego Joaquin Ramirez, DJ. I first met DJ at a set at AVL Fest this past summer. He was playing with Jonathan Scales' Orchestra. If you've listened to the podcast or we've had a conversation, you know I'm a big fan of Jonathan Scales and his band. Jonathan, just the way he writes music conceptually, in his instrument, steel drums, that is something I never really, I appreciated, but it's not something that I would turn on to listen to, and now it is, and especially with him. So definitely check that out. But yeah, so, and like I've said before too, Jonathan Scales, kind of like his orbit just kind of attracts and holds these monsters. Case in point, Elon JD on bass. Like he's kind of a local hero in Asheville, but he's also got ties to New York, and he's just got an incredible bass tone, incredible voice too. If you get to hear his originals as well, which I think he does sometimes with Jonathan Scales too. But I just got to see Elon JD with my first guest, Jazz Urias, playing just drums and bass, and oh man, I hope they do more of that. That was awesome. Just getting to see them cover up more space in the way that they can with their instruments, but also their singing and all that kind of stuff. Like it just excites me. That's a duo or two-piece you definitely want to catch next time when they do it. And then, of course, in Jonathan Scales' band, Mason Guidry is just like one of my all-time favorite drummers. His energy, his technique, the sounds, how he and Jonathan and Elon just work together. It's incredible. But he wasn't here for AVL Fest. And at first I was kind of bummed, and I was like, okay, so who's going to fill his shoes? DJ Ramirez is going to fill his shoes, and he delivered. And so it was really exciting to meet DJ, and to get to know him a bit. And he was just super open and excited about joining me for the podcast. So, just feeling a lot of gratitude right now for the number of people that are just showing, excitement for it and support for it. But DJ's a really interesting dude. He, grew up in Ireland. Parents are from different, mom's from, the States, dad's from Guatemala. He's pulling from a lot of things and a lot of experience just within his family of origin, but then also his heritage too. So family's got ties to the Yaqui tribe in Tucson, so he's got that experience. They would often go, like as long as he can remember, to ceremonies in Arizona that were very music and drum oriented. So to kind of see it in that realm, to learn about drums in that realm, and then started playing very young. Dad's a touring drummer and musician. And so he was catching all these lessons very early about what it is to be a musician and an artist, for a career. We also talk about developing and collecting tones. We talk about his experience with music school. We get into more about his collaborations, Jonathan Scales' Orchestra, just doing it like a short stint with him on tour. He just released some tracks with Carrtoons, and we'll be touring with Carrtoons a bit. I think they're doing actually a bi-coastal thing, so mostly I think in the Northeast, and then some out in maybe LA. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check there. He's also just released some projects with Circuit Kisser, which I just learned about too. Definitely check them out if you're into like fusion with a lot of synth work, and you can tell when someone really knows what they're doing with synthesizers. And so this is one of those projects for sure. Check it out. Wayne Tucker works with Robin McKell, and right now he's also working on his own record, so I'm very excited to check that out when it comes. But stay tuned for this one. It's really good, and don't forget to follow me, like, subscribe, comment, review, all the things on whatever platform you use is really helpful for me, so I can keep it going. But otherwise, I'll see you and take care.
I started playing at a really young age, around two. I think I got like my first drum set when I was maybe four. But my dad is a drummer,
Okay.
and my brother is a drummer, and back then my sister was also a drummer. So there's just drums in my house,
Yeah.
so it's very easy for me to just pick that up and just have fun with it. And there was always someone in the house, whether it was my dad or my dad's bandmates or whatever, just to show me something. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
whenever he would have rehearsal, I would just kind of pick their brains, ask someone to show me something, and I just kind of collected things from there since I was very young. My dad would invite me to come sit in and on his gig. He had uh, he had a few different bands. He had like a salsa band. He had like a pop band, funk stuff. And I would just come sit in on a few tunes, and eventually as I got a little bit older, I would then play the whole show. And my brother, was playing congas on the gig as well. My older brother, so I kind of came up learning how to play in my dad's band and learning from him and his friends.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he was in a band of drummers too. Like that would be able to like show you stuff on the drums.
Well, he had a lot of Cubans in his band, and
Okay.
the Cuban musicians could play percussion and
Sure.
piano. So, learned a lot from them.
I found I guess an old home video I think of you on YouTube. I
Yeah.
think it's
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
and what I loved about that, not only like you're, playing talking heads and stuff, but also the drums were like in front of the TV, at least on the angle that I saw.
Oh, okay.
And so to me, I was just like, yeah, that's priority, you know? Like,
Yeah.
so when you talk about like your brother and your sister play and your dad plays, like it makes sense. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that was the priority. It was like before TV, it's just, get on the drums. That's your entertainment.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Um,
that.
yeah. The TV was important too, though, in terms
Uh
of
huh.
like movies. Like, we're all really into movies,
Mm-hmm.
and also like video games. And I feel like those actually are kind of part of my playing too, and writing as well. So, yeah.
How are they a part of your playing?
I just think for the imagination, and I'm also kind of a very visual person.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm into visuals, I'm into stories, just films, directors. I love directors, and creating a piece that tells an exciting story. You know what I mean? That like kind of impacts me too. When I'm playing, I'm thinking about those things too.
Yeah. That's interesting. I've heard other musicians talk about that in a way,
Yeah.
as like composers
Hmm.
and stuff. Like
Hmm.
Omar Rodriguez is one of my favorite artists.
Oh yeah.
And that's, big film buff and often kind of writes and composes based on this idea of like telling a story, a lot of concept albums and stuff like that. Is that the
Uh
same
huh.
for you as you're like composing on the drums?
Yeah. I mean, I also write music too.
Hmm.
Like off the drums. I would. But yeah, just like making things, trying to make things that are interesting.
Hmm.
And like I said, I'm into the visuals too. Like I grew up painting and drawing, and actually I was kind of planning on being a visual artist. I was either going to be a visual artist or a drummer, even in my teens.
Hmm.
And I was like, because I'm really into animation,
Yeah.
and I was like, should I go to animation school or should I go to music school? And like, you know, a lot of people were like, oh, go to animation school, you know, like my mom's artist friends and also my grandfather who was an artist. He was an architect, but he was also an artist too. He wanted me to go to like art school. But
Right.
then some people were like, nah, go with the drumming or whatever. So like I feel like the older I get, the more I sort of connect those two things. You know what I mean? Like even if I'm not drawing or painting, I kind of it's still in there visually. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when I do fills or if I do solo or if I'm writing a piece of music, I'm also just like trying to use my imagination as much as possible.
Got it. So you're
Yeah.
actively like using your imagination to picture that. It's not like synesthesia or something where you're just like seeing sounds or hearing colors, that kind of thing.
It's
Or
that too. Yeah, it's that too, for sure.
fascinating. Any have you assigned like have you recognized any specific colors to like a genre or a certain fill or style of music?
I definitely like major 7 is kind of blue for me. Like I
Okay.
just instantly see blue if there's a major 7 chord.
Uh-huh.
And like a dominant 7 chord is like orange.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's just kind of an
Uh-huh.
instant little flash.
Okay.
So if that answers your question, those are the
Yeah.
kind of things that I like, yeah. But in
Okay.
terms of like a style of music, I don't really it's more small little things like that, you
Uh-huh.
know.
And what do you like to compose on? Like, are you using a keyboard or what other
Yeah,
instrument?
I write on the piano.
Mhm.
Um, I also write like I'll just maybe start with a groove and a bass line, um, and then sort of build it up from there. I've been kind of experimenting with recording myself on piano into Ableton and then sampling myself to create a
Okay.
piece that way.
Okay. And is
Mhm.
that on Ableton? Has that been fruitful? Like pretty
Oh
easy to
yeah,
navigate?
oh yeah, oh yeah. And with the help, my brother is a producer. My other brother, Che, he's in Philly. He's an incredible producer. So he's been helping me with that.
Nice.
And
Oh,
I
I think
call
I
him up.
saw something that y'all did actually, because I saw that name and I was like, I wonder if they're related. So that's your brother.
That's my brother. Yeah.
Cool.
So I call him up like 5 times a day and like, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? If I want to do this, how do I do that? And he makes fun of me because I'm like, he says like, I'll call him up and I'll be like, okay, now I have this figured out. Okay, I got it. Now, how do I actually write the music? Like, how do I actually write a song? Like,
Right.
but so it has been fruitful. It's a great tool.
That's awesome. That's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I don't like, I'm sure jazz musicians have been doing that for a long time. But I just kind of first became aware of like jazz drummers, at least modern drummers, like kind of doing that more with their composing and stuff like that, like Micaiah McCraven.
Oh yeah, yeah, he's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's kind of where I just like found this like these jazz drummers with their roots in I don't know if he has roots in hip hop. He's got roots in a lot of different places, but I saw that, and
Yeah.
obviously you do too, right? But
Mm.
I mean, you're talking about like from your dad's band, a lot of art,
Mm.
at least from your mother's side as well.
Mm.
But then
Mm.
also, I just saw again. It's amazing what you can find. A little dive on Instagram too. Like you had listed some of your early influences and stuff, which was really helpful for me to kind of
Mm.
get some bearings. But just a lot of hip hop, still a lot of Latin musicians as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix, like
Yeah.
it's everywhere, right?
For sure.
Mhm.
I would say I got all the older music like jazz, Afro-Cuban stuff from my parents, stuff from the 70s and 60s,
Mhm.
the Jimi Hendrix. I would say I got all that from my parents, but then, I grew up in the 90s, so
Right.
I was getting all the good stuff from my siblings, the
Nice.
the current stuff. So like Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins,
Mm-hmm.
Wu-Tang, Coolio, like the current stuff where my siblings were like, you got to check this out. You know what I mean? Red Hot Chili Peppers. That was probably my, most, I would say that was like my favorite band for a long time. And Chad Smith was, as far as I can remember, my first favorite drummer. So
Totally.
I learned, like, I used to play along to Blood Sugar Sex Magic
Mm-hmm.
a lot, and I played the song Blood Sugar Sex Magic for my play school graduation. I played it
Nice.
with my dad, and I like
Uh-huh.
sang and played the drums. I think the
Nice.
parents were a little freaked out. They're kind of like, I don't know if he should be saying those words or whatever, but like,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
it's such a good album, though. I remember.
oh, it's
Yeah, I
incredible.
remember like one of the first mixtapes I ever got from a friend. They were like, "Hey, you need to listen to this," and was it Mother's Milk, something like that? I can't
Yeah.
even remember. Yeah, I gotta
Uh
go
huh.
back and look. But it was just like some of that, and then it was like some comedy on the B side, you know.
Uh huh.
So it was like, yeah, it was like blew my mind. That was the first experience of like any kind of art rock. Like that was kind of
Uh huh.
before their work with Rick Rubin, and it was just more of their stuff from the '80s in LA
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, immediately fell in love. Still love them,
Oh
and
yeah.
just how hard they're working too. I can't get over it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
anyway, but yeah. So and
Mm-hmm.
you're working hard. I
I'm
mean,
trying. Yeah, working hard, trying to work hard. Yeah, you have to.
so tell me a little bit more about that. So like you grew up in Cork, Ireland, right?
Yep.
And at what point did you move to the States?
I moved to the States officially for college
Okay.
in 2009. So, I was like 18 or 19.
Okay. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And but otherwise you were, and it sounds like official. So maybe there's some back and forth or something like that between here and there.
Yeah, my mother is from California.
Okay.
And my older siblings are actually from California too, from the Bay Area.
Right.
And um, we we have roots, Native American roots in Tucson, Arizona, the
Okay.
Yaqui tribe, and our
Okay.
reservation is there in Tucson, Arizona.
Hmm.
So my mom used to take us to our ceremonies there every year, every Easter. So I would spend maybe 3 weeks to a month every year in the States.
What were those ceremonies like, if you can share?
Yeah, amazing. It gave me another perspective of how music is played.
Hmm.
Because up until mostly, I guess for a lot of people in Ireland at the time, anyway, music was kind of like a form of entertainment. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But like going to see music in a ceremony, traditional music, it's not necessarily entertainment. It's spiritual. It's a different kind of setting for
Right.
music, for drumming. So that opened my eyes to that kind of avenue of the spiritual side of drums, or the spiritual side of music.
Yeah. And you were doing that at a pretty young age, like going to those ceremonies as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. I can't
Awesome.
remember the first time I went. Yeah.
Uh-huh. It's just always been there.
It's always been there. Yeah.
And so is most of your family here, or do you still have folks back in Ireland?
We're kind of all over the place.
Hmm.
My mother's in Ireland. My dad is in Guatemala. He's from Guatemala.
Okay.
I got a brother in Philly. I got a brother in the Bay Area. I got a sister in the Bay Area. Yeah, another sister
Okay.
in Ireland. Cousins
Good.
all over the place. So we grew up traveling, you
Yeah.
know, all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did your dad tour as a musician?
Uh, he did. I would say more national tours. So he actually was in a pretty well known rock band in Guatemala. They actually opened up for the Chili's like in the 80s.
Nice.
Um,
What's the name of the band?
Plastico Pasado. I feel like he did more touring when he was younger, when he was
Uh-huh.
kind of in the States or in Guatemala. In Ireland, not so much touring, but just kind of gigging. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
he was a working musician, so he was in the city gigging all the time.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, so it sounds like, and then I mean, how much of your gigging life is like his was, do you think?
I don't know.
I guess the root of the question too is like how do you feel like you were prepared for this life in music, you know? Sounds like it was kind of
Oh
always
yeah,
there.
yeah. I feel like I was very prepared. You
Yeah.
know, I was seeing someone working, gigging, providing for their family, and depending on the money from gigs, you know, to
Right.
feed their family. So I was seeing that it's possible, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I guess a lot of people, maybe if their kids want to be musicians, they might be like, "Uh-oh, you know, like
It's a
I
lot of
don't know if
fear.
that's possible to do that. The money, you know, the money, maybe you should get a different job or whatever." But to me, I was like, "Oh, my dad's a professional musician.
Yeah.
You know, he's feeding me and my siblings with the gigs, and I'm gonna do that too. You know, that's you know, that's pretty cool."
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah,
Um,
it's funny how like it's so true. At least the way that I grew up, and I guess a lot of folks here do anyway. And maybe most folks in Western society do too. But it just doesn't seem like stability, right? And
yeah,
so, and not a lot of people do it. So then it's
yeah,
just a lot of fear about what that actually looks like.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, it's definitely unstable at times. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um,
But you know, the
but
life of an entrepreneur is kind of the same way too. I mean, that's essentially
yeah,
kind of very similar. It's like, you know, you have big ideas and you make pushes and launches and those kinds of things. And it's, you know, if you're a business person or whatever, and some days you're like going out for a nice dinner and other days like it's rice and beans, you know?
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I know all about the rice and beans too. You
Yeah.
know,
Rice
like
and beans are great.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess it's just a matter of finding stability within the chaos. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm,
some things you have control over, some things you don't have control over, and it's just like finding stability in the things that you have control over. You know what I mean?
like what?
Like just working hard, doing your best. You know what I mean? Like practicing, uh, just being ready and kind of knowing your intention, you know, knowing why you're doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So kind of coming back to the craft, honing the craft, kind of keeping your eye on the prize as far as like what you're doing it for, you know,
Yep.
and if those things are there, kind of like the lighthouse or the anchor or whatever, like whatever happens on the road or like a
Yeah.
lot of unforeseen things, it's really not any different than if you were just like working a 9 to 5, you
Yep.
know, in some ways, because that can be tumultuous too, you know.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
And I definitely like learned a lot about myself and just what it means to be a drummer in the community, what it means to be a musician in the community from playing with my dad and watching him do his thing. Like there was one experience that I had. Um, you know, my dad just got this new residency at this place called the Rob Roy in Cove, where I lived for a minute,
Hmm.
and he put me on some of the gigs, and he put me on maybe it was the first or the second one of those gigs of the residency. He told me he was like, okay, so I can't remember. I was about 9 or 10, and he maybe I like was just playing too much or just playing solos or something for the whole gig and not really like, you know, holding it down or whatever like he needed me to. And he said, okay, so here's what like we need to do. Like, so we have all these people here. Your job is to make these people feel good and, you know, make them dance for the whole night. That's what you're here to do, right? And so if you can't do that, that means we're not going to keep the gig, which means I'm not going to get paid, which means you're not going to eat. You know what I mean? It sounds a little dramatic, but it was like something along the lines where he explained to me very clearly the line between what I'm playing and how that affects people, which, you know what I mean? So it kind of got me thinking, okay, so like, a doctor does this in society, a plumber does this, a lawyer does this, a musician does this, or a
Right.
drummer does this, so we're here to make people feel good. At least that's my opinion and that's my intention. And so that kind of strengthened the connection with myself and kind of be like, okay, my goal here is to make people feel good. So whatever I can do to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. Yeah, I mean, there's a healing aspect to it for sure.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. I've talked to a number of drummers at this point, like when they've got side hustles or whatever, it's
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes like in the healing arts in some form of
Mm-hmm.
fashion. They're like
Mm-hmm.
psychotherapists, massage therapists, something, acupuncture, something. Not everyone, right? Like
Yeah.
it covers the gambit, but it's just interesting to me because a lot of times, like I've come to this idea, like the drummer is caretaking a lot, right? Like you're
Yeah,
taking care of the vibe, the dance, right? The rhythm, but
for
also like
sure.
keeping folks together, especially if you got like a large band,
Oh yeah.
horns and everything else. Like there's a lot of responsibility to, everyone needs to know where the one is and they've got to look to you for that a lot of times.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
And, and what your dad said, I don't like, maybe it's dramatic. At the same time, there's honesty in that and there's truth to that,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's, I think, and there's motivation in that.
Oh
You
yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see it, because a lot of times too, whether or not we realize those things, like the drums is something that it feels like everything's involved, like your
Mm-hmm.
brain, your body, your spirit, everything's involved. And so like if things are going sideways, it feels like a real threat.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's activating all that stuff to make you like nervous or whatever. And then you got to figure out ways to manage that as well.
Yeah,
But with a
for
lot of
sure.
your projects now, I mean, it seems to me it's kind of a combination of, yeah, like there's definitely a groove and there's a feel that you're going
Mm-hmm.
for. And also
Mm-hmm.
it pushes you. Like I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it can push the ears a little bit and the sense of rhythm in a really interesting way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
where does that come in as far as like making people feel good and also the idea of like, let's see what we can get away
Challenging.
with. Yeah.
Challenging. Yeah, I love that. I love writing on that line of like bringing people in,
Mm-hmm.
and then sort of throwing them off a little bit, or making it exciting or making it a little bit risky, um, and man, like again, I think a lot of that comes from like my love of movies
Mm.
and things like that, where you're on the edge of your seat. It's exciting. You know what I mean? I kind of want to invoke these feelings that I get from watching
Yeah.
spectacles, and just being excited, being interested, and being surprised,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so yeah, I also like, disorientating people. You know what I mean? I like the trippy stuff. I like the psychedelic stuff. I like where people are like, yo, what's going on? You know what I mean?
Totally.
Doing that with the time or so yeah.
Yeah. Um, you said you had learned like a lot of samba patterns and everything else pretty young. Obviously with just you had mentioned some Afro-Cuban influence and
Uh-huh.
everything. So do you feel
Mm.
like that was all pretty well ingrained for you pretty young as far as the polyrhythms and everything?
Yeah, I feel like the Brazilian stuff though came later.
Okay.
I had a teacher. He's still my teacher. Yeah, Andre Antunes, incredible Brazilian drummer living in Ireland.
Okay.
Um, Definitely gave me all the Brazilian stuff. But as far as the polyrhythms, that came from like all the math rock that I was
Mm.
into and involved with. like
Mm-hmm.
when I was in my teens, there was actually a really good math rock scene in Ireland at that
Okay.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a band called Anacrusis, and I would say I'm still into Tool very much so. And
Sure.
when I was like 12, 13, I like learned all the Tool songs, all the Tool
Uh-huh.
grooves, and that gave me a strong foundation with all the polyrhythm stuff, and as you
Oh,
know, as
interesting.
well as Meshuggah, like you said, like the Mars
Mm-hmm.
Volta,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Irish bands, the Irish math rock bands like the Redneck Manifesto, Rest, 10 Past 7, Connect
Okay.
Four Orchestra. There's just
Uh-huh.
like a lot of really good bands there at that
Nice.
time.
Nice. And then, well, so it sounds like you were getting some formal training as well, like before you went to music school.
Yeah, I did attend the conservatory in Cork
Mm-hmm.
for like I want to say a year and a half or something.
Okay.
I don't think I was ready for that kind of academic training because my training was more just like on the job,
Yeah.
sitting in, playing shows, going to see older people play shows, you know what I mean, staying up late, parents having parties, musicians coming over, jamming.
Mm-hmm.
Music was kind of like a late night party for
Mm-hmm.
me. And then, when I was 10, my mom was like, okay, well, if you want to be a musician, you got to learn how to read music. You got to learn how to play piano. You got to learn all these different things, some classical percussion, rudiments. I was just mostly just like playing along to records, learning grooves. I really didn't know any rudiments like then.
Uh-huh.
And so I went to the conservatory. So for my audition, the director was like, hey, so, he was doing like an ear training test with me.
Okay.
He's like, can you sing me a song? And I was like, I don't sing, it's just like, I'm playing the drums. He's like, yeah, just sing me any kind of melody. And I was like, he's like, what, did you listen to music today? I was like, yeah. He's like, what did you listen to? I was like, I listened to Daft Punk. The
Mm-hmm.
Homework album, Daft Punk.
Yeah.
I was listening to that.
Okay. Right.
He's like, okay, so sing me a song from that. So I was like, okay, wow, 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 wow,
Right.
wow, wow, wow. And then he was kind of like, okay, all right, all right. So
That's all you needed.
yeah, he's like, all right, cool.
Uh-huh.
But I had a great teacher there. I like, to be honest with you, like, I had to do timpani, I had to do xylophone, snare drum. I just wanted to just like go in like on these instruments. I was just like looking at them. I'm like, oh my god, I just want to like, but they were like, no, you have to like like this part is quiet. You gotta like all the details, how to read, and like I said, this is all stuff that I'd be very interested in now. But when back then, I wasn't mature enough yet, or I just wasn't ready for it. So I would like wait until the teacher would go and copy me my homework in the photocopy machine in the other room, and I would just wait until she was gone, and I would just like go in on the timpanis, as loud as possible, and then quickly put the sticks away when she, like,
Couldn't hear that. Right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I've heard now. I don't know how. Like, do you feel like that's pretty common? I mean, just a little bit of my experience, so you understand some of the nature of my questions and stuff, right? So, like, I went to like a fine art school growing up, like in middle and high school, and
yeah,
then started to get into music in college, but then just quickly got distracted, went to other things, and it was more of like, go with something else that you can complete or whatever, and then went down career path that I don't regret. It was very
mm-hmm,
helpful in the medical world, but it was it was just not music at that point, right? Like,
mm-hmm,
so it often so I came from kind of more of a like, and when I was interested in something, it was like, okay, well, you get lessons, and you got
mm-hmm.
lessons too, but it was more like showing you how to do things, not necessarily as formal, it sounds like.
Yeah,
So it was like an exploration for you. So it's just interesting to me as I'm talking to a lot of professional musicians that really kind of have that point in time where they're incubating this love and this relationship with the notes and the rhythm that aren't so tied to our or the limits of our theory, right? Of our like standard music theory. And so it's just fascinating to me to like, you know, for you to have that kind of raw personal relationship with music and then apply the cookie cutters to it or try to figure out what that's like. I mean, was school like that for you eventually?
I mean, so like I definitely had some education with private drum teachers before I went to college, and that was like so helpful because I had two teachers that, I mean, I've had a lot of amazing teachers, but just in that period, I want to say 14 to 17, maybe 14 to 18. I studied with this one drummer, Oliver Patrick Laughlin, who's a great drummer in Ireland. And he was so good because he just gave me all the stuff that I wanted. So I would just be like, how do you do that? I would just bring records to him and be like, how do you do that? How does he doing this? Like, and he would show me how to do that. And then he would give me he's like, oh, if you like, you know what I mean? If you like Dennis Chambers, you should check out Vinnie Colaiuta is another guy in that time, you know, or, and so he's like, you know what I mean? Or he would show me the drummer that they like, you know what I mean? Oh, so you like Danny Carey, check out Neil Peart, or you know what I mean? And so, and he gave me all the VHS, like all the modern drummer, the instructional, you know, Dennis Chambers in the Pocket, you know, like all, you know, Dave Weckl, Back to Basics, Carter Beauford, you know, like all that good stuff that I just soaked that all in. You know, I would just go watch all those videos, and that's where I got my stuff from, like, you know what I mean, like was from like those videos. So he was super important. And then, like I said, Andre Antunes, he was a Brazilian drummer, playing like, you know, he was on the scene, he was on the radio, he's in this famous pop band called the Republic of Loose. He also played with like Sinead O'Connor, Amy Winehouse, different artists coming through Ireland. And so I would go watch him play and then be like, okay, how are you doing that? How, a lot of questions about sound, you know, sound is the thing that I actually was most drawn to, on the drums, just the sound aspect, how someone producing that particular sound,
like a tone,
like, why is the snare drum tuned that way? You know, why does the bass drum sound like that? What kind of cymbals are they using? For me, that's the thing that draws me in. That is like the pinpoint of the thing that I'm interested in. So, like, you know, Bill Bruford is another big influence, and he was one of my dad's favorite drummers. And so my dad would explain to me, like, you see, he has the snare drum cranked up that way. Like, you can hear his sound on these King Crimson albums or on this Yes album. You know that that's him because his snare drum sounds like that. Yeah. And he's, you know, he would show me footage of Bill Bruford playing. You know, you see where the tip of the stick hits the drum to get that kind of a ring. That's how he's getting that sound. Yeah. And so for me, the sound was the thing. It's like, how do you know a drummer's a drummer? It's like with the one hit, oh, that's Bill Bruford. Yeah. Oh, that's Steve Gadd. I know that snare drum sound. That's Steve Gadd. Right. You know what I mean? That's Tony Williams. Like, you hear that.
So you don't even. I was just having this conversation, not a similar one, but it was more like by the ride pattern. You know, like telling someone by the ride pattern. But yeah, you get down to the tone.
Just the tone, just one note. Boom. And like that's kind of how I got into jazz and swing music and Miles Davis and all that. Like, it was always around in my household. Again, my dad, massive Miles fan, Jack DeJohnette. Yeah. You know, specifically like the Electric Miles era, you know, Live Evil, Bitches Brew, like that, that kind of era. So
it's a lot of freedom from Jack D on the drums, you know, like, he's not a timekeeper, right? Like, right.
And so the thing that actually got me into really committing to that style of playing was the ride cymbal sound on Nefertiti. Was Tony's ride cymbal sound on
What
Nefertiti?
do you know what it was? Like
Like
the
what kind of cymbal it
hardware?
was?
Hmm.
I believe it's the K.
Yeah.
Yeah, an old K that he had.
Yeah. There was not much
Um,
else, I guess, at that time. Pretty much everyone was doing some kind of K
or an
or
A, you
Beatus.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was just literally the sound of his ride cymbal on
Yeah.
Nefertiti. I was like, I love, you know what I mean? It just,
Uh-huh.
it gave me like a taste that I was just like, it was like mysterious. It was like smoky. It just had a tone to it that I hadn't heard before. And I was just very curious about it. And I was just like, I wasn't getting that kind of tone from the rock stuff that I was listening to,
Right.
or, you know what I mean? I was just like, what is that? That's intriguing to me, you know?
Yeah. So tell me about that journey for you. Like, where are you with finding that tone? Like, do you feel like it's a part of your signature? Is that something like you're statically looking for, or how's that changed?
I mean, I feel like most drummers are looking for that Tony ride cymbal tone. You know what I mean?
Always looking for
It's
that. Yeah.
such a staple. But yeah, I would say that I have been just collecting tones
Uh
from
huh.
musicians and drummers. You know, where I figure out how, or I do my best to try and figure out how they're getting that sound, why they're getting that sound, how it affects the song, and then I'm that goes into the bag, and you know it's that goes into the library where I can just, if I'm working on someone's music, I'm like, I feel like a Steve Gadd like snare drum sound
Mm.
with, you know, whatever mixed with something else, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And so, and how do you achieve it then? I mean, is it literally just the collection of maybe snare drums you have, or is it just a matter of tuning and muffling and all that, or what's that like for you?
I would say it's like researching
Hmm.
would be like, okay, so listening, getting the sound into your ear, and then
Hmm.
researching about it, see if you can find interviews about where they're explaining what kind of drums they're using, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
you know, with Steve Gadd, it's like, oh, he's using the Yamaha recorded customs, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
or you know, he's using this kind of drum set with concert toms. They don't have any bottom heads on it, you know,
Right.
or you know, he's using hydraulic heads. Those were the heads of that time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just trial and error basically, and research,
Uh-huh.
and then tuning and seeing if you can, you know, how close you can get it.
Nice. How is it for you? Because you've got several projects going on that you're a part of,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you've been working with Carrtoons. You've been
Mm-hmm.
working with Circuit Kisser for a while now, right?
Yep.
Wayne Tucker, and then I mean I've
Mm-hmm.
seen you just on your Instagram feed. I mean it looks like several other folks as well. Like how many
Yeah.
different like what are your main projects right now? Would you say?
I would say like right now, right at this moment, would be like the ones you said: Circuit Kisser, Cartoons, Wayne Tucker, and then my own. I'm working on my own record and
Okay,
getting my own group out
nice.
there right now. So just kind of finishing writing the music, um, figuring out how I'm gonna transfer that music that I've kind of composed on Ableton into a live setting,
Okay,
um, and and then just different session work, you know, recording sessions
yeah,
and all that, and about to go on the road with great jazz vocalist Robin McKell. We're about to go to Europe.
okay.
Um, yeah, just keeping it moving.
One of the things that we talk about on this podcast are
Mm-hmm.
just kind of blocks and kind of how you get through them. Like if there was, right now it sounds like you're working your way through Ableton and kind of like developing the way of like writing your music and using that as a tool. Are there any other skills at this point that are maybe, that you're trying to reach right now or that you've recently surpassed or what is that like for you these days on a technical aspect?
I would say the thing I'm kind of working on now is just band leader stuff and just working towards releasing music under my own name, which I
Yeah.
haven't really officially done that yet. I've had bands before. I've always been writing music, just for fun, just for myself. So now the next step is just like curating that, with the help of, my producer, my brother, and, the musicians that I'm playing with, and just getting that to a point where I'm releasing that and putting that out there. So those are some challenges I'm facing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like you're pulling from, I mean, I guess with your connections and stuff like that, like you've got a lot of resources as far as like one
Oh
your
yeah.
brother and like other folks too.
Oh yeah. I feel very lucky with
Yeah.
the amount of resources that I have. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right on. Cool.
Yeah. And then just time management, that's always a struggle for me, and figuring out how I can just stay on top of the music that I got to learn and prepare for people.
Yeah. What
And
can I ask, like, what is that like for you? Like, again, I saw you filling in for Mason.
yeah.
Uh, and so like, what's the kind of lead time that you get for that? And what do you prefer as far as how much time you can like study it
Oh,
or
it really depends on the band leader. It could be anywhere from a month to an hour, like
Mhm.
I would say I'm pretty good at working under pressure. I'm better at focusing in crunch time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I've developed pretty good ears in terms of learning a song like on the spot live. In terms of like learning music, I spend a lot of my time doing that these days. That's kind of
Hmm.
mostly what I'm having to do. I operate under the advice from amazing, alto saxophone player, Antonio Hart. I
Okay.
never actually studied with him, but I met him at a recital in Queens College, and I just moved to New York, and he gave me some excellent advice. And because I asked, it was like, I just moved here. Do you have any advice? He's like, if someone asks you to play a gig, don't do the gig unless you can really learn the music, and you know if you think you can do a good job on the gig. Don't take the gig if you're like, uh I don't know if I'll have time to check out music, but I guess I'll just show up and try and make my way through it or whatever, which sometimes unfortunately that's the case. But like, if you can control it and ask yourself, do I have enough time to really check out the music? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So that's kind of, I try to ask myself that when I take a gig, when someone asks me to play or record.
And does it start with just kind of passively listening, or are you like taking notes as you're listening to something for the first time?
It depends on the music, but
Hmm.
I actually do write out like my own little, not charts, but just like cheat sheets or whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
I have a book of notes that has the hardest music that I have to play. I have an actual notebook. I wonder if I have it here. It actually belongs to my niece. Uh, but yeah, it just has songs with little notes and stuff like that, things to remember, and the act of like physically writing something down with my hand, it actually
Yeah.
helps me with memorizing.
Sure. And what was it like for you with like John Scales orchestra songs?
Uh, uh, well, first of all, I should say that memorizing music is way easier if you really like the music.
Yeah.
And in this case, love the music, love his
Yeah.
band, love Mason, Elon, Jonathan. It's excellent music. It's an excellent band. So
Yeah.
it was easier, even though it's like challenging. it's easier because I just want to listen to it anyway. You know what I mean? Like, even if I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't learning it, I'd be listening to it and learning
Nice.
from it.
Yeah.
So, learning his book, I was excited to sit down in a room with no windows and listen to some phrases over and over again. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've learned so much from that,
Nice.
from having to, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love it. You know, the fact I haven't seen it too often where you go to a show and part of the merch is his, you know, sheet music. You can
Yeah.
buy that, you know. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll try to work through it. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. I
But
mean, you know, if you're going to learn music, definitely do it by ear. At least
right.
try to do it by ear. You know, I'm
Yeah.
more of an ear musician in general.
You take time to teach also.
I do, yeah. Right now, I have about 4 students.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, sometimes I don't have time to teach, but when I do have the time, I like to do that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I like to help other drummers, especially when they're very serious about what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and when they, you know, yeah.
And do you teach online as well as in person, or what does that look like?
Yeah, a little bit of both, but mostly in person. Like during the pandemic, it was mostly online, but
Sure.
now it's mostly in person.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. There was one thing I saw on one of your, it was an Instagram post or something, but it was sound detail repetition. And
Mm-hmm.
it just struck me. I don't know why I enjoyed that like title so much. But
Huh.
was that the name of a specific groove, or is just that's kind of how you're thinking about your sound?
I think that's just kind of how I'm thinking about, you know, my sound and what I want to achieve and how I practice, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So like I said, sound for me is like the number one thing, you
Right.
know. Um Detail, I love detail, you know what I mean? Like this goes back as well to drawing, painting,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I love like looking at a painting, seeing all the details, and you know, in general, I love simplicity
Mm-hmm.
and minimalism, even though it might not sound like that or seem like that. I'm definitely into that, and I
Mm-hmm.
like simplicity with like detail. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Things that on the surface are like, oh, that's kind of seems kind of organic, straightforward, clear. But then
Right.
when you kind of zoom in, you're like, oh, there's a lot of little intricacies, you know, being taken
Yeah.
into consideration here.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, just playing like a 4/4 groove, you know, it's never ending. Once you zoom in and you zoom in again, you zoom in again, all the little
Yeah.
details that change the big picture, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I was just relearning this lesson. It's something you kind of learn about. I think the first time, you know, I'd heard about it was reading Dilettime, and they talk about simple, complex, right? And then
Oh,
also, I
okay.
think Janice also brought up something about like in jazz, when it's a tempo and it's like slow, and it just seems simple, but then if you like dig in, they called it like adult time or something like that.
Interesting.
All these different words that I'm picking up now, but I just learned it again in the past couple of days because I've been digging on these like just soul grooves, like these orchestra or these organ trios and whatnot, or like if it's like Taiwanese funk soul kind of feels, you know. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I can dig that. I like that's one thing I feel like is a strength of mine is pocket. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
flourish a lot. Like my fills, I have fun with it, but it's just not my forte. So I was like, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
focus on this. And then as I'm
Mm-hmm.
diving in, I'm like, this is not simple.
Oh
You
no.
know, it
Yeah.
sounds and it feels real good like it is,
Yeah.
but it's not. It's
Yeah.
not. Those bass drum hits are not. They're not always lining up, and they repeat, so you can tell like the drummer is intentional about it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's very nuanced, even for like a
Oh yeah.
6-7 minute long jam or groove that it does not seemingly change. Like there's not a clear bridge. It's just the same. But like when you break it down, it's like, oh my gosh, this is 6 minutes of like, you know, really paying attention.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to what we were talking about, where it's like, what's your goal? You know, you're making people feel good, but you're also challenging them when people take the time to be like, what's going on here? Like, you know what
Hmm.
I mean? Bringing people in where people are like, okay, this is a groove, but oh, okay, there's like some ghost notes happening on the snare drum. And
Hmm.
okay, the bass drum is a little bit behind, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
there's just the breaking down the extra layers that where the artist has taken time to put little Easter eggs in there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And then I'm also just fascinated with musicians and artists that take something that's so complex and then present it in a very clear, simple way where like anyone off the street can be like, wow, like that's amazing. I feel that. But then really if you break it down, it's like super intricate.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that I'm interested in.
Yeah, there's something there too, like because kind of like with the lesson that your dad taught you or was talking
Yeah.
about, as far as like making people feel good and like just having, you think about it as being that reliable drummer, right? And
Uh-huh.
then or like a timekeeper. Not that he was saying that, but just what I think of when I hear that,
Uh-huh.
just keeping the groove, but then you've got to embrace it in that way too. Like, and there's things to find about it, right? So it doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just one way or another. There's
Oh yeah.
complexity in the in the simple things, like you're talking about, if you really pay attention and if you really internalize it.
Yep. Totally. And also that's kind of an open-ended thing. It's open to interpretation. Is like you can make people feel good with something that's simple. You can also make people feel good with something that's totally crazy and chaotic and exciting. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be, you know what I mean? It can be open to interpretation, but it's like I can be just holding the groove and not changing it, or I can be completely messing with the time and doing all kinds of stuff like, all over the drums, but
Mhm.
my intention is still there, is like I'm doing this to make it exciting, make it interesting for
Mhm.
people.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well,
Yeah,
maybe I'll ask you one more question just about your
sure.
own. It's like I'm just now excited about this prospect of your own record coming out.
Uh-huh.
Um, and maybe I don't, it's probably not a fair question. I'm just interested, like how, like what different components you picture for that. If you think of different artists, not that you need to name anyone, but like that are in your head that you really want to get this player in on your record or whatever it is. Like, how does that go for you?
So, like, yeah, because this is my first record, I feel like everyone on the record is like generally people that I've been playing with
Mm-hmm.
a lot,
Okay.
either for a long time or a lot recently. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'll say about that.
Okay.
And I guess I'm still making it, but I'm trying to have a kind of cohesiveness to the whole thing and a kind of consistency to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of, even though I have, I would say right now there's probably like 6, 7 different musicians on it,
Okay.
but I want it to sound like just the same band in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The same
Yeah.
kind of cohesive, consistent thing.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
so yeah, and hopefully that comes across. There are a lot of different influences in there. I have one song that's kind of like almost like indie rock. I have another song that's like, there are a couple songs that have no drums on there.
Mm-hmm.
That are kind of ambient. There's definitely some R&B stuff, and there's definitely some like fusion stuff in there.
Okay.
But yeah, hopefully it comes across as a kind of cohesive thing. But
Right.
it's my first record, and I'm still figuring it out. And
Uh-huh.
I know it's going to take a while to get there. So yeah, I'm just having fun with it. It's been a fun. It's nice to like write music, record it, listen back, be able to get in there and change things yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that was a new process because I've recorded my own music in the studio
Right.
where before where it's like there's someone else, doing the things, copy, paste, picking the takes, and uh, for me, I want to get in there myself. Like you know what I mean? I need to like
You need to lay
do
into the
all.
timpani, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah,
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. And then you'll be in Europe
I'll be in
touring
Europe.
soon.
Yeah, in October. Yeah,
Okay.
and got some shows with Carrtoons coming up as well
Okay.
in October.
In October. And
Hmm.
do you know where those will be,
So,
or a
yeah,
region anyway?
October. Yeah, we're playing in Boston on the 17th. Playing with Poisson Rouge in New York City on the 18th.
Okay.
We're playing Terragram Ballroom, I think it's called, in LA on the 5th of
Okay.
October.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay. Bi-coastal thing. It's a
yeah.
lot of travel, but you're
A
used
lot
to
of
that.
travel coming up. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I love to travel.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything else you want to put out there as far
Man,
as
just
just,
saying thank you, man. Just like thank you for having me on here,
are
and
you kidding?
it
No,
was a
thank you.
lovely
Yeah.
chat.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I loved having you on. I've been looking forward to it. And really, it's just one of those things. I'll share this with you just because you're a King
Sure.
Crimson fan. I
Uh-huh.
didn't learn about King Crimson until I saw them, and they opened for Tool at Red Rocks.
What?
I know.
They opened for Tool. That's
They did.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Maynard talked about how weird that was for King Crimson to be
Yeah.
opening for them. But
Yeah.
I think it was the Lateralis tour, and Danny Carey had just unveiled like his
Wow.
golden drum set. I don't know if it was his first. That was the first show he unveiled it, but it
Uh-huh.
was mind blowing and life changing. That show was. That was like in
Uh-huh.
2000 or 2001. I got to go back and look.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
I don't think Tools played Red Rocks before or since then. Um,
Okay.
but that was the first time I heard about King Crimson, and I was just blown away. And then, so all that to say, like, not to make you feel weird, but like when I, you know, saw you playing, and not like I was like I went through this roller coaster of like being bummed I wasn't going to get to see Mason because I hadn't seen him live yet,
Mm-hmm.
and then to see you, I was like, oh, this is amazing, So it was like
Mm-hmm.
just that
Mm-hmm.
discovery is really exciting. So for you to be able to, join me for this, I really appreciate it.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to your album and whoever else that you're involved with, and definitely Cartoons and all that. So it's gonna be fun exploring and checking that out. But yeah,
Thank you, man. Thank
absolutely.
you so
Thank you.
much.
Absolutely.
Let's keep in touch.
Sounds good.